All right, so verse 22 on page 391 of the Philokalia, as just to give a summary so everybody knows what's going on, that we're doing the Philokalia because we're studying this book, The Way of a Pilgrim. And anytime this Philokalia plays a big role in his life and his pilgrimage and his learning. And so anytime he brings up a text, we've been digging into it. And we've kind of gotten stuck in this one because it's quite a bit longer than I thought it was, or we're taking more time than I thought. So we're now on point 22. And he's going to tell us here in a moment more about this interior prayer or meditation. You know, interior prayer for the Christian is very similar, if not the same thing, as meditation is for a Vedantist or for a Buddhist or for any practitioner. When you notice that you begin to weaken in prayer, take up a book and, paying attention to what you read, try to understand its meaning, right? So this is a way, you need to be friends with your mind. You can't oppose your mind. You have to accept it as it is, but you can let it rise and fall on its own without identifying with it, without getting caught up in the story of it. But you have to be friendly to the mind. You have to be respectful to yourself, which is an odd thing to say, but that duality that we experience inside, where we talk with our mind or our mind talks with us, we go through a thinking process, as it were. We've said in the past, you always have to be sure that you understand that when you're thinking, that which is hearing your thinking, that which is the witness of your thinking, is your beloved, is the divine. And so you should never be in there, when you think to yourself and you say something like, oh, you're such an idiot. Oh, you're so stupid. Why are you doing that again? How can you possibly have done this before? When we talk to ourselves, which I'm taking a risk and assuming that all of you do that as well. But when you're thinking to yourself like that, you should adhere to those rules of respect that you would hold when speaking to the Divine Mother, to God. That your mind does not have permission, even though it's your mind, it does not have permission to be disrespectful toward you, to be cruel, to be mean. And so that interior dialogue should always be held at a very high level of expectation, that your voice, your inner voice, should always be encouraging. It should never break you down. It should never list your faults. It should always believe in you, and it should always hope for you, and it should be your greatest fan, which is a funny way to talk about it, but take that and digest it as you can. But that inner world, that inner psyche that we use to talk about things in the noisy mind, uh, should be held accountable. And that's why he's saying right here. So, like, if you notice when you're praying that you're getting distracted, that it's just one of those days where the mind is being a toddler and just running all over and putting things in its mouth and just being nutty, you don't have to push against it and get violent with yourself or get anything like that. He says, just at that point, take up a book, a spiritual book, and feed the mind some spiritual ideas to make that noise worthwhile in there, some things that it can think about that will be helpful to you. Another option would be to take up a song, to sit down and sing a song to the divine, to the beloved, or sit down and write a card to Mother and offer it on the shrine, or go outside. One thing that I like to do in Hollywood is, if you're restless, you just can't sit, and you should sit sometime. Like my guru told me that if you can't do a meditation for whatever reason, if a scheduling thing or a time thing or whatever, she said you should always still go into the shrine, bow down and tell Mother, I can't sit today, Ma. I've got this going on, but I wanted to come and touch you for a moment and be with you. And then you get up and go do what you have to do. And one of those things is, I always like, if you're feeling selfish or you're feeling like your world is too much about you or something, take $5 and go for a walk. And before you leave the house, ask Mother, say, Mother, I know that one of your children out there needs this money. I want to go for a walk and I want to be available to you to give them this money. So please show me somebody that could use this money or that this would be helpful for. And you just go out and just don't come back with that $5. Don't buy yourself an ice cream either. Go go out and give it to somebody or buy something for somebody or help somebody with it if you can, whatever it is. But do little things like that that will train you, to serve and to keep your eyes on other people's needs and other people's interests, and you know uh, play this game with the Divine Mother in the sweetest of ways. And so if the mind isn't behaving, if yourself isn't behaving, if you just can't discipline yourself to do a practice that day, it's okay. Be kind to yourself and be loving, but keep your effort on gaining a spiritual ideal. And so, keep your eye on scriptures or on a song or on a piece of art for mother or giving some money to somebody on a walk or something. Just things to bring the mind back and to in a delightful way, not an oppressive or repressive way, but in a freeing way, train it. The mind, after all, as long as it's noisy and behaving like a toddler, it's your disciple. Your mind is your disciple. And so treat your mind as your disciple. And what do disciples like to tell about everybody about their gurus? How loving and kind and accepting and warm their gurus are. So you, as the guru to your own mind, should have that same attitude, very loving toward yourself. Because until you learn to love yourself, until you learn to see the divine within yourself, then you can be of no real service to the world, because you haven't learned to love if you can't even love yourself. That's where we begin. So your inner world should be full of light and full of love and full of encouragement. And if your mind is anything different than that, you need to sit it down on a stool like a toddler and give it a talk. Say, look, this is the divine that we're talking to in front of. This is Mother. And you need to use words and thoughts and ideas that are worthy of that. Nothing else is allowed, period. And move forward. Go with it. So that's what he's teaching here. When you notice that you begin to weaken in prayer, take up a book and paying attention to what you read, try to understand its meaning. Do not read the words cursorily, but examine them with deliberation. This is a very good idea. One of my favorite books to do this with, for me, it doesn't have to be for everybody, for me was that book, I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. I used to take that book and sit in this wonderful wingback chair in the monastery living room back in San Francisco in the early days. I would sit there and I would just read one couplet, one question and answer couplet. And I would read it 6, 7, 8, 10 times. Every so often, I would read it and then I would just kind of ponder it and see what was in it for me. And then I'd pick it up and read it again to see if there was something else in it that I hadn't seen before. I would go through every word and make sure that I understood what that word was being used for. Excuse me. And so, to study like that, and like yesterday, like we were going along and we read those three components, that devotion, that oh, what a great job I'm doing of remembering what those three things were: the devotion, the love, and there was one more. What was the other one? Anybody remember?
Faith? Was it faith,
Faith.
Swami?
Faith. Yes. Thank you. Faith. Yes. And so, when you read those words, don't just read them like you know what faith is, because we have no idea what faith is. we conjure some ideals together and go forward with it. But sit there and contemplate it and bring the divine into the conversation. Say, is there something more here for me, Ma? Is there something I don't understand or something that I can learn? And you sit and just roll that word around in your mind before in Mother's company, and she'll take you more deeply into your practice, more deeply into that relationship. It's amazing what Mother will show you if you simply take the time to ask or to include her in what you're doing. It should be every aspect of our life. I got in a little bit of trouble last week because I made a financial decision without even praying about it, which I didn't even think about. But that night, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I just distinctly could feel Mother just standing there tapping her foot, looking at me like,
Oh,
"Excuse me, did you just made a big decision about the money that I've given you, and you didn't even pray about it. You didn't even ask me about it." And I had some reckoning to do. I had to sit there and do some soul searching, like, ooh, I'm losing some of my perspective. I did made a worldly decision without Mother. And life doesn't work that way. It'll clunk on for a while, but it won't work that way. We should live in the presence of the beloved always. Every decision we run by the divine. Everything we learn, everything we read, as we read, even as we're watching. And it doesn't matter if it's for entertainment. There's nothing wrong with that. But entertainment is so much more beautiful if you're being entertained with friends. And the best friend of all is the divine. And so when you go out and go for your walk and you see something beautiful, please give it to your mother. you know, Let her know, wow, how beautiful you look in that sari today, Mother. Oh, look what you've done with that flower. How can it exist in a world of giant planets hurtling through space, and yet this tender flower, smaller than my pinky, can find peace, can find a safe space to grow and to express its beauty? You know, Learn to think like that, because this is your nature. This is Eden that you're living in. It's our ignorance that keeps it from being paradise to us, but it is Eden. And when we learn paradise, when we come to understand, that inner paradise, this paradise that we live in will then appear as Eden for us. So live in Eden every day. Do not read these words cursorily. That means don't just read them and pass over them with the assumptions of understanding. Read them with deliberation, searching out their meaning, and store what you have understood in the treasure house of your mind. Yes. As long as we're living in the mind, as long as the mind is causing that noise, as long as we can't slip out and slip under, as it were, then train the mind. At least to that point, to keep the mind focused or pointing in the right direction. Then begin to reflect on what you have read, so as to gladden your heart with understanding and make what you have read unforgettable. That's why we keep running it through our mind over and over and over, so that we can remember it. It's always great to read a paragraph. This is one of the tools that I've used in the past with Sri Nisargadatta, actually, that time when I was reading that book. To read a paragraph, and then after you've finished reading it, see if you can paraphrase it to yourself. Then you say it back to yourself. And if you can't quite remember the points, then go back and read it again, and read it slowly and read it with great attention. And then maybe turn around and turn to Mother and try and repeat it back to Mother. Did I get it right, Mother? Is there something else in there that I should see or that I should understand? You know, and make yourself aware of her presence in the mind, and that will make the mind obey, make the mind behave itself. Yes. Meditations on divine things will kindle warmth in you. Indeed. Now that's a byproduct. Don't do it so that you get to enjoy that warm feeling. Don't do it for any sensation. All sensations are delusional, regardless of whether they're great ones or not. If they're a sensation, they belong to Maya. So we don't take comfort in them. We look at them and accept them and acknowledge them and tip our hat to them and let them go. Right? We don't lose sight. And actually, if you really get a good meditation where you feel a lot of that love and a lot of that warmth, a lot of that light, or whatever your experience might be in that meditation, when you do it, let it remind you of that which is experiencing the light or the warmth or the love. So try and take your attention off of the glimmer and onto that which is paying attention, onto the source of that attention, you know? And I I don't want to encourage us to be pleasure seekers in spiritual life, because that's not helpful, but that's just a different form of worldliness. But you will find that if you are having that sensation or that idea of love within, and you are able to kind of take your attention off of the the sense and put it on the observer, put it on the awareness. So you're working on becoming aware of awareness, that bliss will increase. And to the degree that you're successful in opening yourself to the awareness itself, that bliss will continue to increase. And so it's quite, mother is definitely right there. She's not She's not even a veil's width apart from you, though your attention may be elsewhere. You may not have seen her. She is not apart from you. You just need to see her. You just need to stop looking for her and just see her, as Vivekananda says.
Maharaj,
Yes.
when you say the awareness of awareness, you reflect it back onto the awareness of awareness, you mean the source where this happy feeling is coming from,
No,
or
no,
the
no,
bliss
no,
is
no.
coming from?
No, no, no. I mean that which is enjoying that happy feeling. Yeah, put your attention on that which is enjoying, that which is observing this warm feeling. Who is this warm feeling happening to? What is this warm feeling happening to? And it's a tricky exercise. It might take some time. I'm still working on it after all these years, because our tendency to, when we study things, and that's what we're doing, is kind of studying our interior world in a way. We always want to objectify it, put it out in front so that we can look at it with the mind and talk about it and discuss it and all of that. But this really, you can't do that with this. When you become aware of awareness, it's really just an opening. You basically have to turn all of the tools that you would normally want to put something in front of in order to study. All of those same tools are used, but not to study the object, because it's not an object. It's not in front of you. It's the studier. It's the self. So what you do is take all those tools and silence them and turn them into, I call it like satellite dishes. You turn your whole mind not into an organ of action, not into an organ of thinking, but an organ of receptivity, an organ that's an ear. Turn it into an ear, so that the mind, the attention, the body, everything is turned into an awareness, a listening device to awareness. That's how you become aware of awareness, because the awareness itself can't be objectified. That awareness is God. It is the I am, right? And you become to just if you do it, you'll learn all kinds of things. Even if you do it wrong, you'll learn that you're doing it wrong eventually. So you just keep opening, just keep opening. It's the same way, it's the same practice as neti neti, in a sense. Neti neti is that not identifying or grabbing anything that goes through the mind. That's the practice of neti neti. I'm not that, no, I'm not that. It's that same kind of practice, but instead of focusing on not that, you just kind of, while all of that is coming and going, you're just being aware of the fact that you're aware, and trying to separate that awareness from the objects of which it's aware, to become only aware of that unchanging absolute, the divine, God, who is aware, who is your own awareness. It's funny because Brahman and awareness are one. That awareness is God, but awareness of awareness is the devotee. Right? And so you're trying to come to that point where you are aware of that awareness within you. And Ramana
Thank
Maharshi
you,
also,
Maharaj.
yes. Oh, yes, we had a question.
It's okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
I was halfway down the block, Kamala. I'm sorry.
But you made it clear, though.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. So he says, what you have store what you have understood in the treasure house of your mind. Then begin to reflect on what you have read, as so as to gladden your heart with understanding, and to make what you have read unforgettable. Meditations on divine things will kindle warmth in you, as David says, while I was musing, the fire burned. As food gives pleasure to the taste when properly chewed, so divine words feed the mind and gladden the heart when they're turned over in the soul by reflection. What a nice thought. How sweet are thy words unto my taste, says the same prophet in Psalms. Learn also by the heart of the words of the Gospels and the sayings of the Holy Fathers. Study their lives in order to have all this as subjects for meditation during the nights. Yes, so the mind doesn't wander out into the senses, doesn't go out and get lost and get itself hurt. You know, it is your toddler after all. You shouldn't let it wander freely out into traffic. So give it positive, helpful things to think about, things that are interesting to you. You know, just go into the scriptures, study the lives of the great saints, the great souls, study the writings that they've put together, the shlokas. You know, pick ones that are difficult to understand. You know, go and grab something from the Brahma Sutras or something and sit there and just mull it over. Just roll that thing around your head, trying to get some understanding, some new insight from it. And then ask yourself, how can I use this in practice? How could I deepen my practice using this idea or using this teaching? What is in here for me? Number 23, if after reading and meditation on divine words you are still in need of reviving your thought, since it is too weak to pray, and of making it once more alive and active in prayer, practice oral psalmody. That's singing, that's reciting psalms, that's chanting, you know, all of those things. So this is another thing that you can do, but in a low voice and with attention of mind, not allowing yourself to leave uncomprehended anything of what is uttered by the tongue. That's how you practice mindfulness, which is really what you're trying to accomplish, to bring the mind to its awareness. And so while you're singing the song, think of every word that you're singing. If you're chanting, think of every word that you're chanting. You know, put each one of them consciously at the feet of the beloved, every one of them with as much meaning as you can muster, with as much attention as you can muster. You know, if in the course of this practice something eludes the attention of the mind, again return to the same verse, no matter how many times this happens, until finally the mind is made to follow what the tongue utters with unfailing attention. Right? So keep doing it until you do it right. Keep saying, you know, this. Okay, Ma brought this to mind. I'll share it. I remember way back when my first trip to India in 1999, and I was what an amazing trip that was. I was learning so much. I got to meet so many wandering sadhus as we were up in the Himalayas. And I had just spent the day. I think it was one of the swamis from Mayavati. I was staying at Mayavati at the time, and I had taken a walk with them, with the swami that day. And it was the first time that I had had some alone time with an actual swami. And I was asking him some questions, and he got to talking, and we were just walking through the woods in the foothills of the mountains there, and he was telling me about God. But he wasn't quoting any scriptures. You know, up until that point in my life, anytime somebody had said something about the divine, they always said, "Oh, in John 3:16 it says this, or in Revelations 21:8 it says this, or this, that, and the other." Everything they ever talked about God always had a reference. This was the first time I was talking to a person who talked about God as a friend. No scriptures, no references, just freely talking about the divine. And you know, as we had walked, he began tearing, you know, out of the far corners of his eyes, and he was just so lost in love as he was sharing these things with me. And that night I was so touched by it. I left my room in the dark and went out into the woods down by this pasture. Actually, I was on a dirt road by this pasture. And I thought to myself, I want to bow down before God. But I really want to bow down before God. I don't want it to be an idea. I don't want it to be a ritual. I don't want it to just be an action. I really want to bow down before God. And I stood there refusing to move until I felt that inner stirring, right? And there was a bit of disappointment in it for me because I didn't have the faith to do that action sincerely. And that was what was revealed to me actually at that point, that I didn't even have the faith at that point in my life to sincerely bow down before God. And I really struggled with it that night. And I was really kind of disappointed that I couldn't do it properly. And so in the end, I ended up bowing down because it was proper anyway to the mother and apologizing that it wasn't what I wanted to do, that it wasn't as deep and as meaningful and as important as I wanted it to be for her. But I did it and walked on. But that helped me to realize where I was at. That helped me to see in reality what my inner life was like. And it gave me something to work on. It showed me that something needed some work, needed some attention. And so, when you do things like that, if you are in line and you're going to take the dust of the feet of the Swami, I'll just buzz over that one. But if you're going to take the dust of the feet of the Swami, understand that you're not, understanding that you're taking the dust of the divine through that Swami, first of all, so that he doesn't get an ego. And touch those feet and really try and make sure that everything you do with the beloved, for the beloved, in the company of the beloved, please always make sure that you're being as present as you can, that you're being as sincere as you can muster at that moment. And that's not to say you need to be ashamed or anything if you can't get it to that level, but be aware of what you can do. Just don't live ritually, automatically. Add this insistence of depth into your practice and into when you're reading and into your studying and into your worships and the things that you do during the day. Go in and when you buy yourself a piece of candy, buy mother a nice piece of candy and go out and see how honestly and earnestly you can offer that to her. See how sincerely you can set that down and give it to her, like that. So that's what he's saying here. And do it over and over, because eventually you'll be able to do it in the proper way. Your ego will get out of the way, and you'll have a moment with the beloved that is sincere, that is earnest, and that will be a treasure for you. And that's the treasure he's talking about storing up in the mind, this treasure of understanding. The mind has enough strength to psalmodize with the lips and at the same time to remember God. Learn this from experience. That's what we're talking about. Get your religion out of the books. Get it out of the temples. Get it out of religiosity and get it into love. Get it into your daily walk, your daily experience of being what you are in this world. Let it teach you and let it inform you and let it enrich yourself, so that you have something to give to this world. You have something to leave for this world. If a man converses with someone, he talks to him and at the same time looks at him with his eyes. In the same way, you can practice psalmody with your lips and look at God with the eye of the mind. You can live your whole life that way. You can live your whole life that way. With the eye of your mind, gaze at the mother's beautiful face, always. Gaze at the beautiful face of Jesus. Gaze at the beautiful face of Buddha, of Rama, of Krishna, of the divine. Always keep the mind on those beautiful eyes, that beautiful life. In 24, he says, do not neglect kneeling. Yes, kneeling is an outward expression of humility, right? And we need infinite humility. in order to be able to accept that grace, the amount of grace that's necessary for us, in order to accept that much kindness, in order to accept that much forgiveness, that much mercy, that much love, we have to be extremely humble. We have to know through experience that we can't do this without the beloved, that we can't even have our simplest existence without the beloved, you know, that all that stuff we're unconscious of, the fact that we woke up this morning is grace. The fact that we ate and that the body knew what to do with the food, all of that is grace. When you learn something, when you grow in your spiritual life, it is because of grace. You know, if people ask, what is grace? Well, grace is your ability to grow. It's your ability to recognize a mistake and change. It's your ability to learn, to approach God. And she lifts that veil. He lifts that veil for you as you grow. And so keep your eyes there always. And do not neglect kneeling. Kneeling represents falling into sin. No, that's different. I never heard that. Implying also confession of sin. Okay, well, let's read the whole thing here. This is a very Christian perspective. I was looking at it from a Vedantic perspective. So do not neglect kneeling. Kneeling represents falling into sin, implying also confession of sin. Okay, so in a sense, it's a confession of your humility, a confession of your inability to do this on your own. So more in a Vedantic tone, that's how we would talk about that. It's not so much the sin, it's so much your inability to fix yourself, as it were. With confession of sin, rising up from the knees represents repentance, represents a determination not to fall, not to go again in that direction, not to make that mistake again as best as possible. So that getting up, you shouldn't stay down there. If you stay down there, it's an insult to grace. Grace is meant to stand you up and to give you confidence, to give you the strength, to give you the courage, the audacity to hug the Divine Mother, to hug God, you know, to run over and embrace Jesus, as it were. This is the purpose of grace, to give you the courage that you cannot muster yourself because you are not worthy and not able to become worthy of that. So grace is what gives you the ability to be the friend of the divine, to be confident in the presence of love, right? So that you don't have to worry about how bad you are, how horrible you've been, how mean you've been, all of those things that we tend to think about when we're in the presence of God, because that light is so bright, it reveals everything to us. And if in shame, you know, if we take the bondage of shame or the bondage of guilt, that's a non-acceptance of grace, you know, and we can't experience the divine without accepting that grace. So don't hold on to your unworthiness. Know it for sure. Don't hold on to it. You know, Mother will forgive you. It's one of the things Mother says that's very difficult. She says that the grace of God is easily attained, but the grace of one's own mind is difficult indeed. So take that teaching. You know, not only can God forgive you, but you can forgive yourself. And those need to happen, right? And to forgive yourself means you don't think about it again, right? You offer it to Mother, say, I'm terribly sorry. You set it down, and you don't pray again every time you every time you go on the shrine. You don't have to pray for forgiveness for the same thing. That's lacking faith. That's lacking your sense of grace. You apologize once, you mention it once, and then you walk directly into that shrine with the boldness and the fearlessness of a saint. And go and sit before the Mother and don't think about it again. Don't avert your eyes for a moment. You know? There's this idea that's occurred. Like, I often have read these near-death experiences, you know, that people have, and they always talk about going through this tunnel, approaching some light at the end of the tunnel. It's a very common story in there. And I began to kind of reflect on how that fits into my image of the Vedanta and God. And I like this idea that, you know, you're walking down that tunnel and you're approaching that divine light. Everybody says that it's the most revealing, loving light they've ever experienced. But everything is exposed. Everything, right? And our job in this life is to gain a deep enough faith and understanding of grace so that as we walk toward God down that tunnel to that light, all of our faults become visible. All of our weaknesses become apparent. All of our wrongness becomes apparent. But if in this life you have established yourself in grace, you can keep your eyes on that light and you can walk boldly into it. And that will be your liberation. That will be your freedom. But if for a moment you cast your eyes aside, if something is too personal for you, something you haven't relinquished to the mother, to the divine, if there's some desire or something in there that you're not willing to be seen in front of the mother in the face of grace, you cast your eyes to the side and forget that goal. That's your rebirth. You will go right back to that thing that you were not willing to let go of. And you will pick up where you are from there. So this is the importance of divine grace, so, as if you needed to be told that. But know that your confidence in front of the beloved is not your worthiness, not your wonderful personality, not your delightful wit, not your charm and your childlike nature. It's grace. It's God's grace for you, God's love for you that inspires everything that you have to give back, right? In the same sense, as these things come to mind, I just say them. I don't know, I've said them before. But a good way to think of this is, I remember when I was a kid, I don't know, I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, and my mother had given me $10 to buy Dad a Father's Day gift at the store. And I was shopping around looking for something for $10 to give to my father. And even as a kid, it occurred to me that the $10 that she'd given me was from Dad, because Dad was the source of all money. And I started sitting there thinking, like, well, this is kind of dumb. Why didn't we just give Dad $10 and tell him to come to the store and buy what he wants? Why why am I sitting here taking his $10 trying to figure out what he wants? Right? Well, why do we do that? Because what we're doing is not spending $10 on something that Dad wants. What we're doing is taking $10 and turning it into our love and giving that back to him, right? So we're taking what we're being given, turning it into love, and buying him. I think I bought him a little Snoopy statue that said "Think Snow." I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. But that is the way it is with the divine. Look, the divine has given you everything. You have nothing to give. You can take that lasagna to the temple and offer it and lay down in your sari on the front floor and offer all that stuff. So what? You have that lasagna because of everything that mother gives you. You're giving her nothing if that's the attitude. What you understand is that you're taking what she has given you and you're turning it into love and offering it back to her. So what she has given you, you turn around after you have added your love, added your inspiration in that love that she's shown you. You give that back to her. You reflect the divine back to the divine. And that's how we grow. That's how we gain our confidence. That's where we gain our love and our awareness of this beautiful, immortal relationship that we have between God and ourselves. So rising up from the knees represents repentance, suggesting a vow of a virtuous life. Each time you kneel, make a mental invocation of Christ, casting yourself, body and soul, at the feet of the Lord, to incline the God of souls and bodies favorably toward you, which he always is. But you have to have the mind allow you to have faith in that, allow you to trust that, allow you to have no doubt whatsoever in the grace of the divine. If while practicing mental prayer you take up some undistracting work with your hands, This also will be helpful to you in the most difficult task of prayer. All the works indicated, when connected as weapons with prayer, sharpen attention, banish despondency, and give youthful vigor to the soul, and render the mind more acute in vision and warmly zealous in the exercise of mental doing. As soon as the gong has sounded, leave the cell, your physical eyes downcast and your thought plunged deeply into the remembrance of God. When you have gone into church, so when this bell that they're talking about, in Christian monasticism, there's what's called the offices, and I think there's 8 of them in total. And they happen, I don't remember the times. I practiced them for the year that I was up at Holy Cross, but they only did 5 because they didn't do the ones through the middle of the night. They actually go around the clock, but there's one at 7 in the morning, one I think at like 9, one at noon, one at 6, one at 8, and one at midnight. And the bell will ring, and you just get up from whatever you're doing immediately. You go to the church, and there's always it's depending on each office is a little bit different, but each one involves some singing, some chanting, some reading of scripture, and some silent prayer. And if it's the one in the morning around 9 or 10, that's mass. You take communion at that time. So that's what he's talking about here. So when the bell rings, as soon as the gong has sounded, get up and leave your cell, your physical eyes downcast. Why? Not because you're sad, but you want nothing around you to distract you from the thought of the divine, from God. So you're leaving your cell, which means you're going out into the world, as it were. You're going to see all the other brothers and all the other devotees in the church. But you go out, keep your eyes downcast to protect yourself from giving the mind food to wander, and your thought plunged deeply in the remembrance of God, just completely staring at the beloved, at the divine. When you have gone into church and joined the number of the worshippers, do not let your tongue indulge in idle chatter with the neighboring monk. All right, this is good. You can use these even though you're not monks. Still, when you go to the temple, obey these ideas when you go to the temple. Go there with your eyes downcast, so not looking to be distracted. Go there with the thought of God deeply plunged, with your mind plunged deeply into the thought of God. Don't go there wagging your tongue, looking for your friends and everybody to catch up with and find out what happened to Sarah's daughter, and did Mike's child get into the best college, and did this happen and did that happen, and who's wearing what, and who's behaving in what way. All these nasty little habits that we tend to take into the temple with us unconsciously. Don't. Go to the temple with a vow that you will speak only of God to anybody who speaks with you, that you will only recite encouraging scriptures to get to people that you meet, to share with them, that you'll talk to them about the divine things to help them keep their mind on God. Nor let your mind wander into vanities. What are vanities? Vanities is being proud of all this stuff. Vanities is being proud of how spiritual you are, or proud that you've actually come to the temple for the 3rd time this week, nonetheless. These ideas. Vanities are thinking anything of yourself, treasuring things that change, treasuring the things that end. Those are vanities. All of those things. So we go there to let go of these vanities, these things that are unimportant, and so many of those things, you'll see those things all the time. Vanity of vanities. So he says, don't do it. Occupy your tongue solely in psalmody. We just lost Swami Brahmarupananda. That was something that was characteristic of him. Anytime I saw him when he was not employed in something else, he was chanting, always under his breath, chanting the scriptures, the Gita, whatever it was, always. I saw him so often do that. So this is what he's talking about. When you don't have anything else to do, recite some scriptures, try to memorize something, try to remember what you read that morning. Try to read back to yourself what you thought about during your meditation that morning, or in your studies that morning. And keep your mind firmly in prayer. What does that mean? Keep it firmly in the presence. Keep yourself firmly aware of the awareness, the I am, that is divine in you. Keep yourself in the conscious company of God as you do all of these things. The company of love, to say it in a more meaningful way. Keep your mind squarely in the company of love at all times, and express it, and watch it be expressed, and delight in it. At the end of the service, go back to your cell and take up the work ordained by your cell rule. Go back to doing what you needed to do, your duties in the world, but holding on to the same attitude, holding on to the same condition of mind. There's no need for the mind to change when you leave the temple. When you leave your shrine room, there's no need for the mind to change. You don't set down all of the practices you were doing and now go into worldly life. There's not such thing as worldly life for a devotee. Your practice never ends. It has no beginning and no end. Your life, the way that you live, the way that you are, the way that you think, that is all your practice. And you constantly, constantly, constantly stay in the light of love. Be inspired by it. On entering the refectory, do not peer at the helpings of your brethren, and do not injure your soul by improper spying around. So you just that's good work when you go into the temple also. Don't make comparisons. Don't exercise, don't look out there and see who was sitting longest in the shrine, who was nodding off during the during the lecture, who was sounding like what when they were singing. Don't make comparisons. There are no comparisons to be made with anything outside of yourself. Okay. Look only at what is put before you and touch nothing else. So have purpose, right? I learned this from Swami Prabhutananda in a funny way, actually. My first week in the monastery, we were at Bed Bath & Beyond, me and Tyagisha Chaitanya. And we went there to I think, buy a fry pan or something. But they had tea glasses on sale for $1 each. So you get a dozen tall tea glasses for $12. And I was like, wow, that's a great deal. We don't have any tea glasses in the monastery. Greg, let's get some tea glasses. He said, all right. So I picked up a box of these tea glasses, and brought them back to the monastery. And I set them on the counter next to the sink in order to wash them later on. And Swami walked into the room and he saw this big box of 12 tea glasses sitting there. He said, oh, what is this? And I said, oh, Maharaj, I just got those at Bed Bath & Beyond. They were on sale. They were only $1 each. He said, oh, did we need them? I said, well, we don't have any. He said, yes. He said, did you go into the store with the intention of buying 12 tea glasses? I said, no, Maharaj, but I didn't know there was a sale on. And he said, see, monk. Monks do not go into the store to buy what's on sale. Monks go into the store to buy what they went into the store to buy, and nothing else. And he made me take them back. I didn't get that good sale. This is how we live with that control of mind, that purpose of mind. We don't walk around arbitrarily like Ferdinand the Bull, being distracted by all the beautiful flowers and scents around us. We live mindfully, right? With discipline, controlling ourselves, so we don't walk into the store and walk out with a dozen new saris and 2 new pairs of flip-flops and a hat, when all we did was go in there to return 12 tea glasses. So he says, look only at what is put before you and touch nothing else. Give food to your body, the hearing of what is read to your ear, and prayer to your soul, so that being fed in body and spirit, you may be able to give full praise to him who has so mercifully satisfied your desire. You see, so there's even a way of eating where you're not eating for yourself. You're putting that on the tongue. You consider your tongue an altar to the divine. And you offer the taste to Mother before you have an opinion about it, before you allow yourself to realize whether it's good food or bad food, salty food or hot food. Before any of that, you put it on the altar of your tongue You offer that taste to mother before you enjoy it. And after mother has had that taste, and after you're satisfied she has accepted that offering, then you taste it and you swallow it and you eat it and you move on. Everything done as offering, everything feeding your humility, everything feeding your attention on God, on love, on this perfection that we live in the presence of. Then get up, enter your cell modestly and in silence, and like an industrious bee, readily resume your proper occupations. If you do some work with your brethren, let the hands work while the lips are silent and the mind remembers God. If someone starts vain talk, to stop such unseemly behavior, get up and make a bow. Salute them. don't don't tell them, stop talking about worldly things in the temple. How can you possibly do that? Or even worse, go to the other person over there and say, oh, I was just over there trying to talk to Swami C, and he was just going on and on and on about tea glasses. It's like, don't don't be that. Be in the presence of God and act accordingly. It'll be a natural thing for you. It is your nature, after all. It's not your nature to be led around by a worldly, uncontrolled toddler of a mind. It's your nature to be in the presence of pure love, in a sense of ecstasy and warmth and delight all the time. That's what you were born for, to see this divine, to know your nature as divine, to live your life as an offering, to love, to wisdom in your existence. Oh, it's 8:02. All right. Well, we almost made it. We only got one more page. All right. So is there any questions? Any concerns or ideas? Longings? All right.
Ferdinand the Bull, huh?
What's that?
Ferdinand the Bull.
Yes, Ferdinand the Bull.
Of
I don't even
all
know.
things that could have came. That's awesome.
Yes. No, this world, like, you can certainly do that. I have to be careful because I mean, I love beauty. I just, it takes my breath away. And I always have to remember to worship, not to just see the beautiful mountain and enjoy the beauty, but to see the mountain and know who that beauty is, who that beauty belongs to. And never forget to make that connection. Let everything you see remind you of the divine. Ramakrishna talks about that. He said, he was at the city park one day and he saw an English boy sitting there leaning against a tree with his leg crossed in a certain way that reminded him of Krishna playing the flute. And suddenly he goes off into ecstasy. That's the way we live. There's another story about an old man who saw a guy with a cane, and he knew the cane was made of the same wood that from the aswata tree or something that the flute that Krishna played was made of. And suddenly his mind was on Krishna and he was off in ecstatic ideas. So learn to live that way so that all of your favorite things in the world lead you to Mother, lead you to God, lead you to Jesus, to Buddha, to Christ, to whatever ideal holds that infinite love and that purity for you. Be reminded of that always, and laugh and enjoy it deeply. This life is, all of your mistakes are hilarious in the grand scheme of things. You're going to laugh at them one day with a jovial, earth-shattering laugh as you understand the truth of what you've always been,
Yeah.
So don't be afraid.
Elizabeth had asked earlier about if were you talking about dusting the feet off the Swami and that it hurts them. I had asked that. I had contemplated that one time about how in consciousness, if say you like to the Swami, it might appear as an itch on the back of the head, but in reality, it's the devotee thinking of the Swami. Is that what you mean? Kind of like, does it hurt them? Like, or like, what did you mean by does it hurt them?
Meant when you take the dust of from the feet kind of thing, does that hurt them because I thought I read somewhere it transferred like your worldly stuff to them and it causes them physical pain. That's what I
Well,
thought.
yeah, you're not without reason. That in the gospel that happens to Ramakrishna several times. So at that level of purity, of a Ramakrishna, yes, yes, there could be some pain like that. However, with what shall I say, with swamis that aren't Ramakrishna or that aren't Buddha, uh, from the swami's perspective, we're taught that you're not touching our feet. You are acknowledging or showing reverence to the cloth, to the color, to the renunciation, to the ideal. And that ideal is actually Thakur. And so the swamis of the order works under the idea that none of us are gurus. We're just swamis. There's one guru, that's Thakur, Ramakrishna or Jesus, or any time that God has come in whatever form he's come in. That's the guru. And so if you are in fact leaving your sins at the feet of the Swami is just handing it directly to Thakur. And Thakur takes that. Thakur deals with that. The Swami doesn't have to deal with that. So no, you don't have to be afraid to hurt the Swami with your sins or with your impurities. You can feel free to leave them there, and they'll go to Thakur, and in Thakur they'll be lost in grace. So yes, in that sense, yeah, these things, there's principles behind them. The oovy groovy stuff I call the oovy groovy things, they're not so much for us to understand or focus on. If the Swami yells out when you touch his feet, then maybe deal, oh Maharaj, I'm sorry, what happened? What happened? And he might tell you he has a hangnail that you just hit. But he might also tell you that, if it is a realized soul, if it is an accomplished, I hate to talk in those terms, but if it is a Swami that is at that level of purity, he may have felt something, but he would have instantly handed it off. It's not going to affect him or her in the long run, in that sense. But yeah, no, Thakur had that happen a couple of times. But I think even the times when he expressed it, it wasn't because of the pain that he felt. It was the lesson that was being taught to the person. Like the one, that young woman who came to him and touched his feet, and he jumped up and because it felt like he'd been stung by a scorpion, and he runs across the room to a big jar of Ganges water and starts dumping it on his feet. And of course the woman is mortified at what's happened. But the real lesson of the story is what happens next. Thakur sits down next to her and sings to her a beautiful song about the gems that dwell in her heart, and for her to dive deep to find her worth within. Because the thing that had stung him was the fact that the woman thought she was worthy, because he was praising her for having built a bathing ghat for some devotees. And so when she had first arrived, she hung out in the back of the room because she was not a pure person, as it were. So she hung back in the room, and Thakur was talking to her. Have you visited any holy people? Oh no, how can I say that? Have you gone on pilgrimage? Oh no, how can I say that? And then she says, oh, but I did build a bathing ghat for in service of some people. And Thakur is very excited and says, oh, that's wonderful. And she says, yes, it's even got a plaque with my name on it. So you see where she takes it. She takes it into egoism, into her accomplishment. And in that confidence in ego, confidence in her accomplishment, she goes and touches his feet, which she wasn't willing to do a few moments ago. And in that, she stings him like a scorpion. So he makes sure that she learns the lesson that we just kind of read about tonight, that you don't approach God on your own righteousness and your own wonderfulness. You approach God because you're aware of that infinite love that is available to you and that is being shared with you. And it's in that grace that you reach down and touch his feet, not in your worthiness or your expression of greatness or whatever that you do such a thing. So he used that, because nobody's pure enough to touch God's feet like that without grace. And so if that was really the fact of the matter, every page in the gospel would be filled with Thakur being stung by the scorpions of impure people. So his point wasn't to elucidate his scorpion sting, his pure nature. His lesson was, no, approach God in grace. Don't approach God from an egoistic sense of self. Always that's his point in that. So
Maharaj, you have a very, what can I say, very amazing way of explaining this, because I have listened to gospel, so many people reading as my own and everything too, but nobody has ever explained it the way you are saying. Everybody has been saying, you cannot touch the feet of a holy person. When you are impure, that impurity they cannot take. And this is an amazing perspective. The way you are talking gives us hope.
Yeah.
I agree.
No, well, it's really the only way. I mean, nobody's pure enough at that level. Nobody will ever be pure enough at that level. You have to be realized at that level. And if you're realized, you're either not here, but you're, but yeah, no, just approach God always through grace, never through accomplishment. That's all. Go, Jesus says if you go to a party, always sit in the humblest chair. It's better to be asked to move up than it is to be asked to move down. And that's the same lesson. It's like, don't go sit at the head of the table until you've been invited to sit at the head of the table. So have that kind of humility, that kind of where you just don't think about yourself. That's all. You don't have to think you're a bad person. That's not the point either. You have to think about the wonderful grace of God. That's all. You have to find your strength in that, and not in how well you're doing. Because if you base it on how you're doing, you're going to be like a ping pong ball in the presence of God. Okay, some days you're doing great, some days you're doing awesome, some days you're doing horrible, and sometimes it's not even days. Sometimes it's in the morning you're doing great, and by lunchtime you're miserable. So if you take that into account when you approach God, it's going to be like you're going to be bouncing all over the place, and that's not what we want. We want that equanimity, and that equanimity can only be found in the perfect love of God, in the perfect grace of the divine. And our mind can only find its peace in that perfect grace, because it's only in that perfect grace that the mind can become courageous enough to set down its very self, to surrender ego, the sense of who you are and what you are. All those things you love most about yourself, you'll only be able to let go of them in the security of divine love, in the depth of divine grace. So that fills our heart, and that's why he's saying here always, keep your mind like a Roscola in the nectar of God's love. Yes. All right, that's a good thought to leave on. So be well.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
I'm Jai Thakur.